This story goes back centuries. In a quiet old settlement, far from the city's noise, lived three inseparable friends, Ahmed, Shahid, and Qasim. Their friendship was like three branches of a tree, always connected, no matter what. Since childhood, they had laughed, played, and stood by each other through every joy and sorrow. But life doesn't stay the same forever. Slowly, problems started creeping in. It felt like a small bird caught in a raging storm, helpless. Work started drying up. Money ran out. Finding food became a daily struggle. The burden of poverty grew heavier with each passing day, testing their patience and courage. The village that once echoed with their laughter now felt heavy with silence and worry. Then came the day when hunger pushed them to the edge. Sitting together, they finally admitted the hard truth: they couldn't survive here anymore. If they stayed, poverty would eat them alive. There was no other choice. They had to leave. With whatever little savings they had, a few pairs of clothes, and some dry food, they set off towards an unknown future. The road was long. Their feet ached. But deep inside, hope kept them going. They weren't just leaving behind a village, they were carrying dreams of a better life. After hours of walking, they reached a strange place: empty fields, tall trees all around, and a silence so deep it felt like time itself had stopped. Even the wind whispered like it was telling an old secret. The sun was slipping behind the horizon, and the cool evening breeze made their exhaustion even more noticeable. Under a large, shady tree, they finally sat down. Ahmed spread his blanket on the ground. Shahid pulled out a small bottle of water. Qasim broke a dry piece of roti and shared it with the others. The only sound was the distant chirping of birds. Qasim stared into the distance, lost in thought. Then, in a low voice, he finally spoke. "Did we do the right thing? Leaving the village?" Qasim's voice was barely above a whisper. Ahmed looked up at the sky, where stars were slowly beginning to shine. A small smile played on his lips. When a boat gets caught in the waves, it needs a shore to survive, even if that shore is far away. Hearing this, Shahid took a deep breath, slipped off his worn-out shoes, and set them aside. Then, lying down on the rough ground, he sighed. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Exhausted, both from the journey and the weight of their thoughts, the three friends lay under the open sky. The night was eerily quiet. No lamps. No signs of people. Just darkness stretching endlessly around them. But even in that loneliness, they had each other. And that was enough to keep fear at bay. Or so they thought. Suddenly, a whispering sound cut through the silence. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an insect. It was something else. Ahmed's body tensed. In a hushed voice, he said, that doesn't sound right." Shahid and Qasim sat up immediately, their hearts pounding. "What is that?" Shahid whispered, his voice barely steady. "It doesn't sound human." Before they could process it, something rustled in the grass, not just a small movement, but something big. Something fast. Ahmed caught sight of it from the corner of his eye. His breath hitched. His stomach dropped. His hands turned ice cold. "Run!" he screamed. A wolf, huge, wild, and hungry, was charging straight at them. All three jumped to their feet at the same time. Adrenaline kicked in, and they bolted. Their legs moved on instinct, pushing through the darkness. The wolf's heavy breathing and deep growls filled the air, closing in fast. The fear was electric, shooting through their veins. They ran blindly, dodging trees and stumbling over roots. Their lungs burned, their legs ached, but stopping was not an option. Then, out of nowhere, Ahmed spotted something ahead, a glow in the distance. "Look! A fire! There's a fire burning," he shouted. As the first light of dawn spread across the sky, the birds began chirping, announcing the arrival of a new day. The three friends were still sitting near the dying fire. Their bodies were stiff with exhaustion, but at least the fear of the night had faded. Just then, the wooden door of the house creaked open. An old woman, fresh from her morning namaz, stepped out. She stopped in her tracks when she saw the three young men sitting outside. For a moment, she just stood there, observing them. Then, in a soft, motherly voice, she asked, "Son, who are you? And why are you sitting here?" Noticing their tired faces and dusty clothes, her expression softened. She smiled warmly and said, "You must be exhausted, and hungry too. Why are you sitting outside? Come in and rest, my house is open for you." The three friends exchanged glances. After the terrifying night they had just survived, her kindness felt like a blessing. As they settled inside, the old woman served them some warm food. While they ate, she listened to their story. When she heard they were looking for work, she nodded thoughtfully. "My 5 cows wandered off into the jungle and haven't returned. If you can find them and bring them back, I'll give you a good reward." Ahmed, always the bold one, straightened up. "Don't worry, mother. We'll do our best to find your cows." The old woman smiled and placed a gentle hand on their heads. "May God bless you, my sons." After finishing breakfast, the three friends set off into the jungle. The forest was thick, wild, and full of danger. Who knew what kind of animals lurked in the shadows? But they had no other choice. They needed the money. All day, they wandered through trees and bushes, calling out for the cows. The sun burned above them, and their legs ached, but they kept going. Finally, by evening, they spotted the 5 lost cows grazing near a clearing. Leading the animals back, they reached the old woman's house just as the sun was setting. Tears well. Ahmed looked at the old woman with curiosity. "Mother, how do you even live here, all alone in this jungle?" The old woman smiled warmly. "Son, I'm not really alone. I have 2 sons and a daughter. They're all married and live in the city. My sons left some time ago to check on my sister. We're just waiting for them to return." She then disappeared inside the house for a moment and came back holding a small bag. Handing it to Ahmed, she said, "This is for you 3. A gift. Inside this bag is more wealth than you can imagine. For each cow you brought back, there's a gold coin. Divide it among yourselves." Ahmed opened the bag and his eyes widened. Gold coins. More money than they had ever seen. But almost immediately, he shook his head and closed the bag. "Mother, we need money, but we can't take advantage of your situation. You keep this. We're just simple laborers, we'll go somewhere else and earn our living." The old woman looked at them, her eyes shining with appreciation. "Honest boys like you are rare. I insist, take it." Finally, after much persuasion, they accepted her gift, thanked her, and left with her blessings. As they walked, something changed. At first, they were just happy. Smiling. Laughing. Talking about how this gold was enough, how they could now return home instead of working somewhere else for a whole year. But as the journey continued, something else crept into their hearts. Greed. That bright shine of gold started planting dark thoughts in their minds. Once, they were ready to sacrifice everything for each other. But now, they each wanted more. After hours of walking, hunger started gnawing at them. Their stomachs growled, their energy drained. They stopped under a tree and discussed what to do. "Let's buy some food from the market nearby," Ahmed suggested. Shahid nodded. "Qasim, you go and bring something to eat." Qasim agreed and headed off toward the market. But as soon as he was gone, Ahmed and Shahid looked at each other. As soon as the thought crossed Qasim's mind, a sly smile crept onto his lips. He bought the poison without a second thought, ready to carry out his plan. Meanwhile, Back under the tree, Ahmed and Shahid sat in silence, their minds clouded by greed. They had made their decision: when Qasim returned with food, they would kill him and split the gold between them. But deep down, something felt off. The weight of their years of friendship clashed with their newfound greed, creating a storm in their hearts. Qasim, on the other hand, walked through the market, holding the small packet of poison. His hands trembled slightly as he thought about what he was about to do. He had convinced himself that this was the only way to claim all the gold for himself. But then, something shifted. A voice in his head whispered, "This money is a test. If I betray my friends today, will I ever be at peace? Will I really escape the consequences?" He stopped walking. His fingers tightened around the packet of poison. And then, in one swift motion, he threw it away. "No," he muttered to himself. "I won't do this." With a clear mind and a lighter heart, Qasim bought food and turned back towards his friends. At the same time, Ahmed and Shahid sat quietly, their earlier excitement about the gold fading away. The more they thought about it, the more they realized how foolish they had been. Are we really about to kill our own friend, for money? Shahid finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Ahmed exhaled deeply. "It's not worth it. We're better than this." Guilt settled over them like a heavy blanket. They looked at each other and silently agreed, no more greed, no more betrayal. They would welcome Qasim back as their brother, just like before. A little while later, Qasim arrived with the food. They all sat down and ate together, smiling as if nothing had happened. None of them spoke about the dark thoughts they had entertained. Not because they wanted to hide it, but because the night was settling in, the sun completely swallowed by the horizon. Darkness spread all around like an endless shadow. The three friends slowed their pace. The road ahead seemed uncertain, and the eerie silence of the wilderness made them uneasy. Ahmed stopped and pointed towards a nearby mountain. "Look, there's a cave up there. It's safe from wild animals and robbers. We should stay there for the night." Shahid and Qasim exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. It was better than wandering in the dark. As they carefully made their way towards the cave, a cold breeze sent shivers down their spines. In the far distance, faint voices, almost like distant shouting, echoed through the hills. It was unsettling, as if the night itself was warning them to turn back. Qasim hesitated at the entrance of the cave, peering into the pitch-black void. "Are we sure this place is safe?" he whispered. Ahmed chuckled lightly. "Well, we don't exactly have other options, do we?" They stepped inside cautiously. The cave was damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and stone. They inspected every corner, making sure nothing else was lurking in the shadows. Once satisfied, they settled down on the ground, exhausted from the journey. "Let's just rest. We'll head home at first light," Shahid mumbled, his voice heavy with fatigue. Soon, all three drifted into a deep sleep. But at midnight, nature had other plans. Out of nowhere, the wind picked up, howling like an angry beast. Leaves rustled violently, trees groaned under the pressure. Within minutes, heavy rain came crashing down, hammering the earth like a relentless drumbeat. The storm had arrived. Lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the cave's entrance for brief moments before plunging it back into darkness. The sound of trees snapping echoed through the valley. Then, out of nowhere, crash! A massive boulder, loosened by the storm, tumbled down the mountainside and slammed into the cave's entrance. The three friends were shivering from the cold, their bodies stiff from the storm's assault. They were so exhausted that despite the chaos around them, they simply closed their eyes again and tried to drift off to sleep. Morning came slowly, if it even was morning. Ahmed was the first to wake. He opened his eyes, squinting into the pitch-black cave. At first, he thought it was still night, but something felt off. He stood up, careful not to disturb the others, and made his way towards the entrance. That's when he saw it. The mouth of the cave was completely blocked. A massive boulder had fallen from the mountain and sealed them in. Panic gripped him for a second, but he quickly shook it off. He rushed to wake Shahid. "Wake up. We're trapped." Together, they tried to push the stone, using every ounce of strength. They pushed and pushed, but it didn't budge an inch. Frustration and hopelessness crept in. They were stuck. "We need to wake up Qasim," Ahmed said, breathing heavily. The three of them tried again, putting their combined weight into it. But the stone wouldn't move. Their hands were sore, and their muscles screamed in protest. Sweat dripped down their faces despite the chill in the air. For a long moment, they all just stood there, defeated. But then, with one final, desperate push, they gave it everything they had. And the stone shifted. Slowly, it slid off the entrance, revealing the outside world. Light poured into the cave, washing away the darkness. They stared at it for a moment, taking in the relief. Ahmed, breathing heavily, said, "We made it. We're free." The three of them stood there for a few moments, just feeling grateful that they'd made it through. Thank God they were safe. The three friends, finally free from the cave, began their journey back to the village. The road ahead was long, and each of them was lost in their own thoughts. Ahmed walked a little ahead of the others, his mind racing. He thought, if we had gone through with harming Qasim, today we would have failed to remove that stone and would have died inside. It's a good thing we didn't let greed take over. Behind him, Qasim walked quietly, the weight of his own thoughts pressing on him. What if I had gone through with my plan? If I had poisoned them, how would I have removed that stone by myself? I could have died there alone. The silence between them was heavy with guilt, but it was also a silent promise to make things right. By the time they reached the village, all three friends knew what needed to be done. They gathered together, shared their apologies, and divided the gold coins with honesty. Now, their bond was stronger than ever. They weren't just friends anymore, they were brothers. This journey had changed them. As they sat together, they all realized something. Greed wasn't just a threat to others, it could destroy a person from the inside out. The lessons from their ordeal stayed with them as they went about their lives. True friendship is more valuable than gold. The rewards of kindness and honesty are greater than anything material in this world or the next. We are lucky to have each other, Ahmed said, his voice steady now.